Oh, I didn't see you there. Well, you've come on a very special day because I have some of the most wonderful in video gaming, stretching from the smallest indie titles to the biggest triple A's. And yes, I think there is an extra fourth A in some of their titles as well that is coming out. So I would like to welcome you all to the Xsolla Diamond Club special panel, Marketing from Scratch. If you are ever wondering what is marketing about, how do you get marketing done, where do you start, how do you finish, and how do you make it effective, this is the place for you. And if you would like access to more events like this, and join a club where you can connect with the industry colleagues from around the world, check out the Xsolla Diamond Club, where you can join for free today. Link in the description below. Please check it out. Without further ado, I would like to introduce each of our lovely panelists, starting with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am probably, the old gray mare of the bunch, since I've been in the games industry about 30 some years now. And I've done everything from the journalism side to working for big AAA publishers to now, for the last 12 years, I've been focused on doing marketing, PR, and business development consulting, in particular with indies. And so, I have an incredible roster of games right now, and I'm also half-time embedded as the marketing and PR director for the new Telltale.
That is amazing, and I assure you, you are just the more experienced person who is around here. But I have to say, we have an amazing experience. Also, Deb Beckman, speaking of good friends back from my G4 days, tell us about yourself. Deb, we're gonna have to come back to you for a second. I think you're a little soft. You're a little soft on your audio, so I'm gonna throw it over to Guille. Uh, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background. What brings you here today?
Hey, hi everyone. That was a very, very good pronunciation of my name, by the way.
I will butcher it mercilessly 50 more
Really
times
close.
while we're
Really
here.
good close. So, hello everyone. My name is Guillermo Vizcaíno. I am head of PR and marketing for a small independent studio in the northern part of Mexico by the name of Lienzo. You might know us by our latest or our last game called Mulaka, just 70% off in Steam sale right now. So go and check it. Or our upcoming title, Aztec Forgotten Gods. We've been around for a little while. We've been around for around 10 years, which makes it sound like we're a little bit older than we thought. And we're just in the studio making it, in the trenches these days. We've got a big game coming out, and of course, in the span of this 10 years, we've learned a whole lot. I gotta say, I was a little bit surprised when I got the invitation to be a part of the panel, because you guys are the rock stars here, and it's really, really humbling and really, really great to be a part of a conversation with guys like yourselves. And I hope that we can afford a little bit of that indie perspective, perspective from outside the US, outside of the regular territories where you see games coming from. And hopefully give our guys in Latin America and other development countries some good news in terms of you can do it, and it's possible to have a game come out and do well regardless of your situation. So appreciate the invitation.
Well, I gotta say, you're a rock star. So thank you for being here. And to finish us out, Tom, a man I have known for quite some time. Tell us what brings you here today to talk about marketing.
Well, I guess to chat with all you wonderful people. Funny enough, I feel like I've known or worked with or talked to pretty much everybody here at some point over the last 20 some odd years, however long that happens to be. So I run Evolve PR. So we are a PR, community management, video production agency, as well as doing a bunch of research work and running Terminals.io, which is a influencer media engagement platform, key distribution platform, and things like that. And ultimately we've worked on a ridiculously wide range of titles. I mean, we've been running the agency for about 15 years now, working with everyone from like CD Projekt on the Witcher series and Cyberpunk, to working with PlayStation on a bunch of reporting stuff, to countless indie devs and Sega and who knows, a whole bunch of projects. At this point, I'm getting old enough and been doing this long enough that I'm forgetting a lot of things that I've worked on at this point. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm very happy to be here.
I think with everything that you've done, you have touched on so many games, as well as started so many different projects. I think your talents have shown through. I think it is, once again, it is not a matter of how long you've been here that you're forgetting. It is a matter of building upon the reputation and the good work that you've all done. So again, I thank you all for being here. And of course, I thank the audience for being here as well if you're watching right now. So, hey, I've got a game, or I'm about to go thinking about putting something out into the world. But man, it is so hard to get in front of people, or the right people who are out there. So to go into it, Elizabeth, to start things off, someone comes to you and they say they have a game, they want to talk about marketing. What is one of the first questions you like to ask a new client or a new developer about their game to get starting to think about marketing?
So, the first things I ask are, every game is different. I have best practices across a whole bunch of disciplines, but, I try to get a sense of what the game is and what their objectives are. And I'll do that even before I try and find out what kind of budget they have, because I think certain games lend themselves very well to different tactics and different avenues of marketing and PR. And I think that, having a sense of what they believe their game is and also what their expectations are before we start to talk through things.
Tom, I'm gonna same question to you. Like, someone comes to you, they ask you, it's like, hey, we've got this game, we think it's fantastic, but where do we start? What are we gonna do? What is the first thing that you ask them?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Liz's point, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can do it. I think now we're because of the sheer amount of competition that I think we're facing in the industry, there's really no right or wrong way to do things. I mean, I think you can kind of lump different games into different categories and kind of make decisions that way. But we've seen games launch with no marketing and do exceptionally well. We've seen other ones spend 5 years marketing and flop. Ultimately, I think from our side on the agency end, and Elizabeth probably has similar, experiences or needs here, is trying to understand what their expectations are. What's the goal at the end of the day? The type of marketing that you're going to do if you're trying to reach 5 million people and get 5 million sales versus what you're trying to do if you're happy with 15,000 units is vastly different. And, so there are a lot of different things that we talk about in terms of timelines, capabilities. Like, if you have a long marketing campaign, you have a lot of information and assets and work that needs to go into that, and trying to sustain a 2-year marketing campaign as an indie developer is a tall order. So for us, it's really trying to understand what they're really trying to do. Obviously, understanding what the game's all about and knowing how we can promote it is important, but trying to understand what they're trying to get out of it at the end of the day. For us as an agency, we're trying to connect or we're trying to meet their expectations and achieve their goals and so on. So we have to know that we can do that. So knowing what they want to get out of it at the end of the day, what they're able to do themselves is really important, because if a developer is able to produce a lot of videos themselves, do all their social assets, they're willing to go out on forums and talk to people on social media and all that kind of stuff, that saves us from having to do that. But all of that needs to happen, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything needs to get done. It's just kind of a question of who can do it, how much we can do, and for us as an agency, how we can help, right?
That is a lot. That sounds like you're asking for video. There have to be there. Like, what kind of asks? Like, you're talking about working with developers. So, like, what is sort of a case where you are working hand in hand, or like what are some of the things that you hope that developers can do to help them to market a game?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so again, like I said, I think there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think that at the end of the day, it comes down to kind of marketing 101, right? Is like, who's the audience? Who are we trying to sell this to? What makes this game interesting? What are the hooks and so on? So from there, we're basically trying to figure out how do we get this game into the hands of the people that are most likely to care about it? Because at least from our perspective, if if a game, let's say you're making a roguelike or something like that, if roguelike fans don't care about your game, you're going to have a real hard time getting anybody else to care about it. So at the end of the day, if we can try and convince or figure out how we talk to those players, whether it's where that's going to be, whether that's on forums or on Discord or on social media or through influencers, whatever it happens to be, there are a lot of different ways that we can go about it. So from the developer's perspective, we just need to understand whether they're able to produce things that will help us tell their story and will help us get their game out into the public eye. If not, it's pretty challenging. If we can't do press activities, if we don't have any marketing materials to show off, if they're not willing or able to do social media content, it's really hard to market a game if you're not marketing your game, I guess, right? So
absolutely, I 100% agree. It is to not just like make a game, but you also have to be able to talk, to show, to get in front of other people. Guille, obviously you've got some great games that are coming through the works. I think a big question a lot of developers ask is, where do you start? When do you start thinking about marketing? And when do you have to think about socials? When do you have to think about events? When do you have to think about these things? In your experience, like, at what point do you think marketing matters?
Right now, I mean, it's I do firmly believe that as soon as you can start that marketing process, the better, right? As soon as you can start with thinking about all of these things, it's going to be better for your overall product and for your end product as well. I think, unlike the one key difference that I can see from, because I mean, I agree with a lot of what already Tom and Elizabeth had already said. The one key difference that I can see is that as a studio, right, if you're thinking about marketing from within the studio, you do have the capability of, if you're starting this process early enough, you can affect the way that you're gonna, how you're gonna affect that life cycle, or how you're gonna affect that game development cycle as a whole. And if you start thinking about what's out there, what's convenient, what are the ascending trends, what are the games that people want to play right now, you can then craft the experience from the get-go that's going to have the most potential for success at the end of the road, right? And it's like it's really sad. Like I can go to so many examples. I'm not gonna mention one by one, but I can think of a lot of games that go all the way through the life cycle of development and that approach that last window before launch, and that you go and you see for the first time and you think, gosh, I mean, they've spent, or whatever, the team spent months or years working on this, and the game itself at its core, it's not something that maybe a whole lot of audience is gonna look for, it's gonna want, and that's a very, very simple task to tackle if you start thinking about marketing from the very, very get-go. And if that marketing and those marketing processes affect and impact those first game development processes as well, I think the one great thing about marketing, even though we're all creatives, is that it's a little bit more formulaic, right? There's a step-by-step process that you can start following, and that really helps inform some of the more creative side, right? The more design-oriented side, the more narrative-oriented side. So you can kind of start on the right track from the beginning, instead of figuring out by the halfway mark that maybe this is not the type of product that people want to hear or want to see or want to play right now. That's, I guess, the best way to put it. And all of that going to the same point of start right now. If you're starting your game development process right now, start thinking about marketing right now. And if you don't have the people to dwell on that, start dedicating a little bit more of your time to that marketing side. If you don't have the time, then get someone that can help you with that. Either it's part-time or full-time, but do dedicate that time and resources to marketing from the very beginning.
Hey, Rob, can I add to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Go for it.
I would agree. I think before you even start developing, you need to know who your audience is, what's the competitive landscape, really doing your research to understand who you're making that game for. So that has to happen before you even start putting in the first code, right? And then you move on from there.
Deborah, just to keep on that sort of topic, like how do you, like I've talked to a lot of developers who are also looking at their audience, and they look at audience as sort of like this big monolith. It's like people who like to play good games. When you say look at your audience, like how
Sure.
do you sort of like start breaking that audience apart? Or like how should developers look at an audience in order to be most effective in their
Sure, it really depends on the genre of game. So someone who enjoys open world may not be a competitive, FPS player. So really doing your homework and really understanding each genre and where that sits in the ecosystem, and as well as who those players are. And I know at an indie level, it can be very expensive to pull that research. So you're just going to have to go old school and just get on the internet and do your best and really look at those competitive titles to whatever title you're wanting to create, and just making some assumptions. So that is a way to start there. If you have the funds, you can pull in research groups like NPD who have, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of info that they have, and they'll be able to help you really look at your game and who those demos are. And then again, you can start to distill. So is it a hardcore player? Is it a trendy, someone who is a little more casual and is mid-core? You just got to do the research no matter what funds you have.
Doing the research is a huge part of marketing. I absolutely agree. I noticed that we're having a little audio and sometimes visual difficulties with some of our panelists, but let me assure you that everyone here is an expert, and we will work through any sort of difficulty as it comes our way. Speaking of difficulties that come our way, Elizabeth, when you are marketing a game for an audience or for a publisher to sort of like pick up, is there a big difference between the two? Because there's some indie developers who are looking just to get something out in front of a publisher so they can sort of like help them take it to the next level. But then there's a lot of indie developers who they think they're ready. They want to like go to market. They want to get like the consumer already like wish listing their game. Like, what is some of the big points that we need to developers need to focus on when sort of like getting these two different audiences?
I think, certainly I've done both. And I think that, and I've both been on the publisher side where we were picking up indie titles and also pitching indie titles to publishers, and then a whole lot of self-published titles. I think knowing if a publisher is right for you, part of that is your bandwidth, your budget, what your again, it comes back to what your objectives are and how many units you need to sell. What else is out there on the market and how you compare to what else is out there on the market. All of those become questions. And what do you have the ability to do yourself? Because I'll sometimes get indies that may be maybe it was the lead programmer and the producer that started it and they brought along an art guy, but they don't have anybody that's done any of the back office stuff or any of that. And often they'll need, or else it'll be two creatives that have never had a producer work on their title, and they are in desperate need of that producer help, that guidance. So that in those cases, I often try to find them a publisher. Then I've got people that have been in the business of putting things out there. I have a current group right now and spent years as a art and animation studio, so they had plenty of experience getting their business out there, but this is their first game. And so they do not have a publisher. They're self-publishing, which is crazy, but they did so by developing partnerships with some of the first parties and getting some help that way, which is another route that you can go if you have one of those special titles. So I think, again, what is your budget? What are your capabilities within your team? And are you going to be able to hire those, or is it easier for you to find those within a publisher? Do you have a title that, is going to catch their attention and something that they feel that you can be successful at, and that where they'll make money and you'll make money? I think is one of the questions. I'm going through doing a deck right now to go out to publishers. And so we're really focused much more on thinking through not just, hey, this is the game we want to build, but what are the core gameplay loops? And how are we communicating those? And how focused are we in our plan? And all of that. So I think those are a few of the things that we touch on.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And Tom, Elizabeth talks a little bit about, she used the big M word, money. It is something that developers don't necessarily think about when they're making a game, especially when marketing is involved. What percentage of a budget, of a developer's budget, do you think should go into marketing? Or like what, for new developers who are out there, for people who are just, they're really excited about their game, they really want to get out there, like what to you feels like something that people should think about, should developers think about, setting aside? It's like, look, you need like X amount, or you need to think about, I don't know, how much percentage of your budget is going to go into marketing, because that's often overlooked until like the very end, and then there's no money. Tom.
Hey, hi, I'm back.
There you are. Thank
Hey,
goodness.
everyone.
We thought we lost you, but we can never lose you.
Well,
We're just all having
The exclamation
crazy problems.
mark.
problem. There's mutes. There's a mute on here and a mute on my mic. Anyways, so speaking on behalf of marketers everywhere, all of it, we'll take all of it. Like every penny that you
absolutely.
have.
So there you go. Every penny you have.
Every penny you have. I often joke with potential clients. I don't know if they think it's funny, but I'm like, we can spend $1 million before we get off the phone. You know what I mean? Like it's really, really easy to spend money. You start talking about influencer budgets, for example, if that was a route that you wanted to go, you're talking a decent sized streamer, one stream for a couple hours. We're talking 10K, 15, 20K more. And so in a lot of cases, that's the entire budget an indie dev will come to us with. I think there's kind of this more, I don't know if it's like common knowledge, old wives' tale, whatever that happens to be, that says, 25 to 50% somewhere in there, anywhere that you can be. I think that once you start talking about really big AAA, whatever, quad A, defined games, whatever it happens to be, I think we're probably talking, 30, 40, 50% at times. But if you could set out a 20% budget, I would love that. But fact is, on the indie side, it rarely happens. And we really end up coming in with anywhere from, like, we have a minimum spend on our side of 10K USD, but that honestly is just for us to be able to take care of something and learn about the game a little bit. It's still not a lot especially once you're starting to deal with working with agencies, for example. It's not the same as just hiring somebody in-house. I mean, part of the benefit that you get from hiring an agency is that you don't have to hire somebody full-time for the course of 2 years and have that burn rate going, and you can kind of really have somebody just jump in when it's necessary. But you're paying a higher hourly rate, whatever it happens to be, so that ultimately you're paying for our time. So the more that you need us to do, the more expensive it gets. The more different things you want to do, the more expensive it becomes. So, I think that if you could set aside 20-25%, that's great. But again, from our side on the agency end, we'll take whatever you can get. There are certain out-of-pocket expenses that you might have if you wanted to produce a press kit or something, or if you want to go to an event, you want to go to PAX or something like that. You're talking like 10K base just to go, basically, right? And that was Indie Mega Booth. That's like, I've got my place and maybe a bit of travel. That's not much. That's not a lot of space. You're generally talking 20,000, 30,000, 50 for a booth. So it can add up really quickly. And so there are a lot of costs that I think a lot of developers don't really think about. And I think you also have to consider, especially if you're doing this work in-house, you have to consider the time and the staffing costs of doing the work yourself, right? So if you're a solo developer or a small developer who's basically doing it all themselves, producing one trailer takes us a good 50, 60, 80 hours, 100 hours, depending on the trailer, right? So we're talking like several weeks of full-time effort for somebody to do. And if you don't have somebody to do that, you're taking that time out of development, you're spending it on something that isn't really your core competency or something like that, right? So there are a whole lot of different factors that you got to take into account, I think.
I would add real quickly to
Go for
when
it.
Tom talked about, the differences of like the time spent with an agency person versus bringing somebody in-house. One of the other perks with an agency is is that they bring with them a lot of those connections. Because one of the things I do for some of my scrappy indies that don't have a lot of money is I look for every co-marketing opportunity possible using my network of people, whether that's Intel or AMD or NVIDIA or whomever, to get us extra dollars, because chances are they're like, oh, I set aside $15,000 for marketing for the entire project. I'm like, well, that won't get you very far.
Absolutely. Like
If you don't mind me jumping in on that one
okay,
too,
no,
Rob.
please.
Just seeing it from because this is one of the questions that one of the questions that we've have to tackle for this past few projects, especially if you're looking from from the indies perspective. You're gonna find if you're just starting, you just have a few games in your catalog, and you go on Google or you go in your books or you go wherever, you're gonna find out authors that are gonna tell you that you should spend 8 to 15% of your game the budget into and put into marketing. You're going to see 20 to 30% maybe as a different range. That's a little bit more tailored to indies because the other one's for larger organizations. Like I think that at the end of the day, the only real metric, it's going to come from an analysis that you do with them, right? You have to figure out how are you burning out? What's your cost? How are you bleeding? What are your hard costs? Multiply that by the time that you're spending with the amount of people that you're spending it with, and then project what do you want to make from this? What is your revenue? What are you expecting to make out of this game? And maybe have a few projections. What's your good projection, a great projection, and your best case scenario? And then from that, you can then devise, a calculation of, okay, so if this is what I project is going to happen, I need to set aside this amount of money that's going to equate to this type of result that I want to achieve. And that's generally hard because that requires some historical data. And so when you're starting, you don't have that, right? But that is why it's important to, if you're just starting, to keep on doing projects and start getting that experience, start getting that knowledge, and from that devise what the appropriate amount of budget for a marketing budget would be. Because if I go right now to a university and be like, yeah, it's spend 30% of what it's not going to be, it's not a one size fits all is what I'm trying to get to. And that's, I think, something that's not really mentioned a lot, especially when, first starter teams, that they have to realize that there's a whole set of calculations they have to do before they start just going on spending money randomly, right?
Right. And you can also look at sales forecasts even as an indie. So you can look at like kind games and what they have sold. It's sometimes hard to find that information. Then you look at comparative to your competition, what you want or hope your sales to be, and what that revenue is. And then there is a formula to understand what your cost per sale is, so you can go even deeper into figuring out what your marketing budget is based on potential forecasting of sales targets as well as potential revenue. That's a little more challenging. You'll find that happening on the AAA side and the AA side. But with, I align with my fellow panelists about 20%. And if you have to choose between a marketer and a PR person, as a marketer, I would say go and spend that money on PR, because they'll get you a very large reach, hopefully, if you don't have funds to put behind marketing. So as a marketer, I would recommend moving in the direction of PR versus, let's say, purchasing media, like search media or biddable media. If you have to choose. If you do both, do both.
I think the caveat with that, though, is if your title's mobile, I would flip that.
Yes, 100%. ASO and mobile game marketing is a whole different beast than, let's say, a console or PC game. Very different tactics.
And there's just very few outlets anymore that, we starved out all the mobile outlets for the most part. And so there's just not a lot of places to take mobile games in terms of PR. So.
Let's talk about outlets for a second, because we're now in a sort of an area where there are your big outlets, your IGNs, your Kotakus, your Polygons, PC Gamer, depending on like what your game is looking for and things like that. But you also have your B-level, even C-level sort of media branches that are out there. Let's go. Tom, I know that you've worked with media. You for a long time. We worked together back in the G4 days. What is it like? How do you get the attention of media? And is it always most important to get like the big media, or are we also looking at like sort of spreading things out to get as much coverage as possible? Like how do you get their attention, and what is the best way to sort of like send that attention around?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think it's gotten a lot harder over the last couple of years, I think, to break through that attention, and I not through any fault of the press. So just to give everybody a little bit of context, so on our platform at terminals.io, we vet every contact that comes through there. We basically built that system to help us manage relationships, I guess, with a ever-growing number of different people. And so we have 25,000 verified media and influencer contacts in that system. So for us to say, okay, let's get coverage from all of them is A, completely unrealistic, and B, just it's such a daunting task to try and figure out, okay, who's the right person for this project and who is most likely to pay attention and so on. But then on the flip side, on the press end, there were 9,000 games released on Steam last year, or I think it was about 10,000 last year. The year before was 9,000. The year before that was, I think, another 9,000 or something like that. So we're talking 30 games a day. So trying to, from the media perspective, understand which games are worth paying attention to is also really hard to do. And I think that if you look at it realistically from the PR perspective, as much as I'd much rather just like to live in my dreamy world where I think that I can get anybody to cover anything, that doesn't happen. And I think we have to look at it realistically and say, the press, it's much easier for them, who are also beholden to advertising revenue and getting traffic. It's much easier for them to write 10 articles about Cyberpunk or, Battlefield or whatever it happens to be than it is to write one article about an indie game that may very well not attract any traffic whatsoever. So it's really easy for them now to kind of sit back and go, we'll see what the community wants us to write about. We'll see what games start to bubble up and then start paying attention to those. But on the flip side, I think that it's important to remember that press and influencers and whoever are just like anybody. We're kind of consumers in a way, right? So we have to get excited about stuff in order to care about it. And I think you're looking at all these game editors, even somebody at IGN, they're still people. maybe mostly, I think. So they still need to be excited. So I think from a game developer's perspective, you're looking at this going, or the PR side, we're saying, all right, I want to give my game the best possible chance to get media attention. It still comes down to who are the right people? Are they actually going to care about this game? If I'm trying to pitch a mobile game to someone who never covers mobile games, I'm wasting my time. And at the same time, being able to just go, I have to show you something cool. You have probably 300 emails in your inbox over the last couple days. I have to get you to open that email first of all, and then I have like 2 sentences to basically catch your attention. And then if I can get you to click a link, if I'm lucky, I need you to be excited by whatever I'm showing you. Otherwise, you're just going to walk away and I'll see you later, right? So I think that from our side, we have our research team and terminals, we try and use it to be able to say, all right, here are the list of specific press, whether it's outlets or editors, that we think are going to cover the game. And then it's just up to us to try and connect the dots and say, we have a game that we think you'd like. Here's a way that we want to show it to you. Let's hope for the best, right? But media, again, it's one aspect of the kind of holistic marketing campaign, and you need to be thinking about all of it, I think, a little bit, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that, just to throw it over to Guille, like you're right in the middle of this right now. Like you're basically sending out those emails. You're trying to connect with the writers. Community. Like what do you find is important to you with the games that you're currently working on right now? Like what is that hook that keeps the editor excited, or the writer, or the the audience that is there? Like what is that thing that you think is important about your game, and like what kind of lessons have you learned while having to send out all of these emails, to sort through everything that is out there?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, first off, it's the basics, right? The marketing essentials, fundamentals. You have to be able to set out your game in a way. First of all, create a game that has something special, and then find what that something special is, so that you can sell it through that, right? And convince people that it's something that's worthwhile. Getting to your 30-second pitch or your elevator pitch, creating those positioning and messaging documents, and finding that voice that you want your studio to have, your game to have, that's the basic stuff. After that, I think the one thing that I see most people failing at, and that it's hard because it's a people skill, and not all of us, like most of us, we started us as introverts, or we're not maybe the most social of people out there, especially when you're starting. But creating those relationships, and that's where the PR side of thing, creating those relationships and being able to manage those relationships and fostering those relationships with a set of different peoples, whether that's publishers or platform holders or press or influencers or whatever. It's important, right? And it's a skill that you have to learn how to use, and how to level up, and how to keep getting better at. And at the end of the day, at the end of your campaign, you're going to see the results from that. In our very specific case, we've worked on a 3 to 5 year old relationship with the platform holder, for instance, with Microsoft, with Sony, with Nintendo. And by working on that relationship, we've been very fortunate, but also we've been able to get our games in one of the most important screens, right, that there are out there, or the most important events that are out there, the Indie World Showcase, or PlayStation Experience Showcase, or the Xbox Fan Fest, and things like that. I mean, getting to that point where people say, like, how did you do that? Well, it's years of emails, and years of meeting with them at events, and years of getting that introvert out of the way, and getting that fear that you sometimes have of speaking with other people, and speaking with people, to people in positions of authority, and realizing, I think someone mentioned it earlier, that they're just people at the end of the day, right? I think Tom mentioned it about IGN. It's just folks like you and I, right? And we're gonna have something in common, and we can start talking about how great, I don't know, Game of Thrones is or was before the last season or whatever. And finding those things that you can share, it's eventually gonna lead to that relationship part of the PR work that ends up yielding results. You put that on top of those marketing basics, and you're able to put a really good pitch for whatever it is that you're doing. In our case, a very vertical Colossus fighting Aztec inspired game, and find the right words to sell that to people, and you've got magic. But you got to put that work behind it.
Absolutely. Deborah, like when we started media, there were a couple of places that you could go out to, a couple of outlets that you have, but we have started showing off like a new world out there, influencers. So we have streamers, YouTubers, TikTokers. What? How do you deal with influencers? What is influencer marketing look like, or is that what is that? Help me out here.
That is a very loaded question. Luckily, we have an influencer team who is fantastic, but it's a great way to really amplify your message and to gain that reach. But as Tom said previously, there is a price to that, right? But people can find influencers or curators like yourself, get on someone's radar and just start talking it up. Also, influencers tend to love to find new IP to play, to differentiate themselves. Again, really just finding who those core influencers are within the genre that you're making, and just start pitching. Again, it does take some money and it can be daunting, but there are folks out there who really want to give indie devs and AA devs a leg up, and really support the community, just like Indie Mega Booth did. Hopefully they will be back. I think that was a really fantastic organization for indie devs, really giving them the exposure. And this is not a paid placement, everybody. It's just, it's just a really great opportunity to get those games in front of, Xbox and PlayStation, as well as other platforms as well. So it's just really tapping into those opportunities and seeking them out. You can't sit back as a dev and let it come to you. You have to really seek it out. I'm not sure if that answered your influencer question.
No,
that could be a whole panel in itself.
This is very true, and I feel like you've hit upon like a really good point, is that influencers, like there are now teams, there are now like whole teams of people out there who deal with influencers, who have that Rolodex and who are managing those relationships the same way that you would manage like a relationship with like media, if not even closer. Having to know who is going up and who's going down, almost like you have a corral, a pool of people.
And I mean, just to add to that, if you don't mind, I mean, like for what it's worth, for the last few years, we've really, on the Evolve side and through terminals and everything, we basically wouldn't do, or we don't really do campaigns that don't involve influencers. Not from a paid perspective. I think anytime that we can, we again just prefer to find people who like the game and are interested. We always look at paid influencer campaigns almost as as Deb said, like potentially a way to kind of amplify your message, but also potentially a bit of a risk mitigation strategy, right? So if you're going toward launch and you're just not sure if people are going to pay attention and people are going to play, you can pay them to play it, and you'll get that visibility. At the same time, there are a whole bunch of other challenges that come up with that, because, for example, you're paying somebody for a 1 hour stream. The odds that 1 hour stream is going to reach a significant number of people, unless you're dealing with really high level streamers, that single stream is a drop in the ocean, right? In the same way that a single article at GameSpot is a drop in the ocean, you need a lot of it. There's this kind of like, other kind of thing I'd read a while back, that people need to see a product about 10 times before it really clicks in their brains that it's a thing they should remember or note. So if you're only getting one piece of media coverage or one streamer's playing your game, you're not really making an impact. You're making a very small dent. You kind of need sustained attention, and that's where a lot of YouTube content creators and streamers that really get invested in your game. The ideal scenario is that they're like, I love this game and I'm going to come back and play it today for 5 hours, tomorrow for 5 hours, and then again for 5 hours, and keep coming back, rather than, okay, here's $10,000, thanks for my 2-hour stream, of which half maybe was learning how to play the game and didn't really show off all that much, and we've moved on to something else. So I think that from the developer's perspective or from the PR side, you really have to think about the balance of it all. And it's like, in an ideal world, you're doing it all. You're doing, as Deb said, you're spending money on ads, you're spending money on influencers, you're doing organic influencer outreach, you're going to events, you're doing PR, you're doing all of it. If you can't, you have to really be pretty smart about how you're using your resources and your time.
Yeah, and another way you can engage influencers if you don't have funds or you can't find those influencers who are fans is offer them an affiliate SKU so that there is potential rev share deal on the SKU, and you can equate the influencer driving sales. So you're going to want to, throw them a bone because they're really helping you on that sales aspect. So that's another option too.
Sure. And Rob, getting back to your initial question when you asked about, bigger outlets, smaller outlets, bigger influencers, smaller influencers. For me, I think the silver lining of this last 18 months is because PR and the media showcases were basically what we were limited to doing largely. I got to dig down a lot deeper than I had in a long time. And I also knew that, the big guys were sitting home with the same stresses and everything that I had, and everybody trying to get coverage from them. And so I did start, refreshing my relationships with some of the smaller publications. I reached much more globally in the last 18 months than I've done in a long time. So now I can easily say, I have first name contacts and people that I'm talking to regularly in all of the major countries. We also, we certainly did a little bit of paid influencer there. I find that for me, I don't go to the really big ones because they're famous because they're a personality themselves, right? It's not about my game or my client's game. It's about their character that they want to play. And so I look for the ones that are most appropriate in the genre, that have a good loyal following, and that I see them go back and doing a series of videos on a game that they like. And a good chunk of those are either lower cost or no cost, or in many cases, I'll also look for ones that are really big into charity streaming, because they generally won't charge you, but they'll stream, and I give them things that then they have the ability to use to raise money for charity. So I do a lot of that sort of thing to help spread the budget. So I think all of those things are important. I still love the Great Big Press. I'm not going to lie. I got a cover this year and it was huge for me. But I think that, for me, getting a chance to really dig down deeper into some of those smaller outlets and smaller influencers was a real blessing.
I think sorry, I was just going to add to that.
Go ahead.
I think what you mentioned that's important there is not every influencer actually has that much influence, so to speak. You might get a stream or a video from somebody with huge numbers. We've seen this. I've seen this countless times where you get somebody who, it's great for morale that the team goes, yes, whoever covered it. 3 million views had no impact on sales whatsoever, because again, the audience is there to watch that person, not to buy whatever they're trying to sell them. So that's something important to keep in mind, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that's fantastic advice. Going back to the outlets, and sometimes we tend to do this, and it's not great. I actually tend to encourage the opposite. Don't looking down on B-list, C-list, D-list outlets and media in general, because Tom put it really well just before with the drops in the ocean, right? The more droplets that you can add to that little rain that you have with your game promotion, whatever those channels are, will end up adding up. And sometimes that, having that coverage in the B sites, in the B-list side, in the C-list sites, will tend to, encourage the A-list side, the IGNs of the world, the GameSpots of the world, the Eurogamers of the world, to then go and cover whatever game you're putting out. So not looking down on those, you will find so much more passion on those smaller sites that you can ever imagine. And that's a really great tool to leverage.
And the key is really understanding and planning out what your marketing plan cadence is, right? So if you have a very limited budget, you're going to want to put that money, some of it into announce, but you're going to really want to put that money into your launch window. Because we really haven't talked about, like, how do you plan marketing? When do you go out? At what point? Is it 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 18 months? And I think it's really important, especially from an indie standpoint, to really understand when you need to do that planning and when you need to execute and how to execute. If that is something all of us can maybe share some insights in, I think that would be really wonderful for any indie AA devs, because we're saying marketing 101, right? So we know what marketing 101 is, but community may not. Anything to add to that? Anyone?
Yeah, like let's break this down a little bit. So Elizabeth, I think I'll throw this to you. Let's talk go-to-market plans.
Okay.
Like we got someone's coming to you and they're like, okay, we got a game. It's gonna come out in X month. It's gonna come out in November. I don't know what month this is right now. Still a pandemic, who knows? But the point is, when you hear that, when you hear go to market, we are going to launch on the next day. What are your points? What are those milestones that you're looking for? Like,
So
what are
I'll
the
try
first
it-
things that
yeah.
you're thinking about?
I'll try and simplify it as much as I can. So first thing I do is, when are they currently targeting to launch? And it depends. Are they launching in 3 months? Or are they launching in 2 years? And I work on both of those. And so, first thing is, okay, here are key beats that we can do, and you will or will not have the bandwidth because you can't do a preview and a review on top of each other, for example.
Let me just like hit on that real quick.
Yep.
I think Deborah put this very intelligently. We know what we're talking about,
Right.
but people who are outside don't know what we're talking about.
So I'm trying to figure out
what
how
is
to
a
simplify.
beat.
So a key beat is a couple of things. There are things in your product roadmap where you will have certain things that happen, where you hit alpha, where you hit beta in your development, or where you can have your first demo, where you can first show first playable game. All of those things when you get to code lock and you're just working on the polishing. So if you can align those with beats that happen in the marketplace, because since I work as largely on indies, I'm usually leveraging other events because I can't afford to get the whole industry's attention on my little game or the client I'm working on. So I have to leverage other people doing that heavy lifting. So whether that's PAX or whether it's, I know that the Mix is doing an event or that Guerrilla Games is doing an event or whatever that is, where they're doing some of the heavy lifting to bring attention there already. So I start to align some of the different milestones of the game of where I'm going to have different assets or the game will be at different points with what happens in the market. So whether that's, we know we have GDC, we know we have E3, we know we have Gamescom, we know we have, all of these different shows or other showcases. So that's what I've always done there. And try and align it that way first. So that's one of the very first things I do is kind of map something out. And in some cases, I will advise them to move their launch date if at all possible, because to give themselves more window or to leverage one of those big events that I think we have a good shot at getting some attention.
To go further into events, obviously, before all this happened, we were talking about events starting to open up again. Digital events, of course, that are happening. Let's float over the delicate issue of whether or not like we should be, events now or later. But Tom, like when we're looking at big events, like we're looking at E3, a PAX, a Gamescom, things like that. What is important to know about these events? And then, are these events, are they just as important as they used to be? Because now we're looking at a lot of digital events. We're looking at, your mix, which used to be a very physical event, is now, a digital event that goes online. They'll probably go physical once again. Indie Mega Booth, which I used to be a part of, we were very physical. What is there still an importance to physical events? What should people know? And yeah,
Yeah.
how can we help?
Yeah, all good. So I think kind of tying into what Elizabeth was talking about, I mean, one of the analogies I use, or metaphors, I guess, is thinking about a campaign that you're building as a train line or a metro line. So basically every station that every station on your train line is another beat, as Elizabeth was saying. So we're talking about, that could be anything, literally anything. It can be a social post, it can be going on Imager, it can be a press event, it can be your review period, a trailer, whatever. Each of those is an activity. Each of those is a station on your line. If you only have 3 stations on your train line, you better hope everybody's getting on board at that time, or else nobody's going to be on your hype train, so to speak, by the time you get to launch. So part of what we want to encourage developers to do is build a lot of stations. Those could be tiny things. Maybe you're only going to get, to keep the metaphor going, 3 people will get on the train. A couple people will get off because they didn't like what they see. But by the time you get to launch, they'll add up over time that you'll at least have people there paying attention. Events are one such thing. I think that there are pros and cons right now. I mean, the digital nature of a lot of events means, as we saw this last E3, we're talking 500 something games that were shown off over the course of a week over a variety of different events. I think from the consumer standpoint, it's really hard to know, what am I watching? What am I paying attention to? What's the big one? You can't maintain that kind of attention. Whereas previously it's just E3. Okay, I'm going and I'm going to know what's going to happen. From the developer's standpoint, the benefit that you get out of events, at least physical events, and maybe to some extent digital, is that you have a captive audience, right? I mean, it's like there's a set number of people. For example, E3 or Gamescom prior to COVID, you could reliably go there because that was the time when most media and influencers, by the end of it, were going to be there. So that was a great opportunity to show your game to a bunch of people without, as Elizabeth was saying, trying to have budget to show a million different people these games over the course of a year. But that comes with costs, obviously, and it also, I think one of the challenges that we end up seeing, and something that we did some research on a couple of years ago about E3 specifically, was that, I mean, you had about 10 games that got the vast majority of attention. Everything else barely registered on the radar. So if you're spending tens of thousands of dollars to get to an event, you have to kind of accept, again, going back to like the expectations versus reality and what you're hoping to get out of an event like that. If you're trying to go to PAX and get press coverage, maybe not. It's maybe not the best event for press, but it depends on the game that you have and whether you're going to get that attention. In a lot of cases, it might be a better option to do your own thing or find a more isolated time rather than competing with 500 games over the course of E3 week. Find a time when you can sort of own the stage a little bit. And I think we're seeing a lot of AAA companies go that route and just go, forget it, I don't want to compete, so I'm just going to go with everybody else. But to Elizabeth's point, I mean, again, it is still an audience that's watching. I can get a spot in the PC gaming show or something like that, and that means that PC gaming fans are watching that event. You can buy that attention, I guess, and they have sponsorship packages if you really want to do that. But if you can get in front of that audience, you're not going to be able to do that on your own, really. So I think that there is benefit, but you have to balance it with your overall campaign budget. You know, if you only have $20,000, would I say, all right, we're going to throw that all into packs? Probably not. You know, I think there are a lot of different ways that you can go about that.
Absolutely. Well, we're just about out of time. I want to make sure that everyone can have a last word in, as well as we'd love to know more how we can follow you, what you're working on, and maybe like one piece of advice you wish developers would know about going out there, because I know that everyone sort of has to deal with different ideas and different natures that are out there. So just with Guille, where can people find you? What are you working on? And one piece of marketing advice do you have for everyone who's out there?
Didn't even give you time to think about the advice, man. The first one.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I'll think it through. As I say, I'm Guille Vizcaíno. You can find me mostly on Twitter as 6U1LL3. I know it's weird. It's my name with letters and numbers because I was young and I didn't know any better. You can find me in my email, guillermo.vizcaíno at lienzo.mx. And man, advice. Look, what I always say is there's two things that you have to know. If you're going to go into game dev in general, in whatever role that is, you need to know that it's going to be tough as nails. It's not an easy job. It's really tough. You need to be in constant learning. You need to be paying attention to a lot of things. You need to make movies that have interaction embedded within the experience in an active audience and whatnot. So it's going to be tough, but it's not impossible. You know, if you see a bunch of random Mexican guys, you know, from northern Mexico making a game that happened to be relatively well known, and you know, we're no geniuses, we're nothing out of the ordinary, then anyone anywhere can do it as well. And that's important to figure out, whether you're in South America, in India, in Eastern Europe, in wherever you are, there's a shot, and the only way of knowing if you're going to make it is by taking that shot. It's going to be tough, but it's possible. So take the shot.
Excellent. Deborah, how can people find you in one part? What piece of advice can you leave us with?
Sure. So you can find me on the Twitters at DebBlues. I can't talk about what I'm working on right now, but one word of advice: find out who your audience is. Find out who your competition is. Make a marketing plan. Go full-blown marketing plan and then peel back based on what your funds are. Do not be afraid to ask questions, come to panels, seek people out and ask advice, because a lot of marketers and PR people are good people, and they will be willing to give you a conversation without charging you $5,000 for a retainer. So ask questions and seek people out. People are willing to help.
Elizabeth, you're up.
Can be found most places as eBethO. And so pretty much 24/7 these days. I'm currently working on Clever Plays Operation Tango, Happy Giants, Salmon Max, this time it's virtual, Happy Campers, Blockbuster Kaiju cosplay game, Telltale, and of course, Kena Bridge of Spirits. And so a little crazy right now. My advice would be I don't think that there's one way to do this. I think about what your capabilities are as a studio and how you can best tell your story and the story of your game, and then find the avenues that suit you best and that you have the capabilities to do. And I would second the, network and ask questions, because that's the best way to get help.
And oh, you're muted, Tom. Muted.
You muted again.
Muted. Still muted.
I'm really good at this. You'd think I'd be better at spending
You are awesome, Tom.
on phone calls. Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about. I'd spend way too long talking about all the different projects we're working on. But you can find me on Twitter at EvolveTom, or our company at evolve_PR, or at terminals.io. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the biggest advice I would give, and Guillermo, I think, touched on this a little bit, is that it's never too late, or it's never too early to get started, rather. The biggest challenge that you can face is if somebody says, nope, sorry, it's too late for us to do that, and you have no ability to adjust course on your campaign. At the very least, if you get started early, you can try things, see what sticks, double down on whatever works. But if you don't give yourself the benefit of time, you're pretty much screwed. So yeah, get started early, and as everybody else said, ask for advice. There's plenty of it out there. So yeah, just ask.
And I would like to thank everyone who tuned in. Thank you, audience. You are awesome. You look great today. Is that a new t-shirt? As well as I would like to thank Xsolla, the team over at Xsolla, for putting all of this together. This has been the Marketing from Scratch. And if you are interested in more amazing panels with even more amazing people, please check out the Xsolla Diamond Club. If you would like to get access to more events like this, enjoy a club where you can connect with industry colleagues from around the world, please check out the Xsolla Diamond Club, where you can join for free today. Link in description below. And I am Rob Manuel. You can find me on Twitter at 8BitWiz. And my piece of advice is to drink more water and to play more games. So there you go. Until next time, see ya.
Thank you.